Hello everyone, and welcome back. In this video, we'll be talking about the historical side of the procession called the Little Entrance. Now, I'll get right to the point and tell you what you all want to know. What is the original route of the Little Entrance? Well, the original earlier one is the long route through the whole nave and back. Now, this is done in the Greek churches and Greek-influenced churches today. And this route is influenced by the very solemn hierarchical celebrations, that is, when bishops are celebrating, of the great cathedrals of the Christian East, primarily the great church of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia. When the patriarch entered this church at the beginning of a liturgical celebration, sometimes together with the emperor, both were greeted at the doors in the back of the church between the narthex, the entranceway, and the nave of the church, and those doors were called the royal doors, perhaps confusingly for some of us, because, for example, in the Russian Orthodox tradition, we call the royal doors those that separate the sanctuary from the nave, but that's a different story. So in the Hagia Sophia, those were the royal doors in the back, and the bishop and emperor were greeted there by the clergy. The clergy would come out to them, and the emperor and bishop, usually the patriarch, were given lit candles and holy objects to kiss, like a gospel book or a cross, you see. It was customary thus to venerate a holy object upon entering a church before the development of the tradition of placing icons in certain places and also venerating them, for example. This was before the development of the iconostasis. You know, just as today a bishop is still greeted when he enters a church with a cross that is brought out to him to kiss on a platter. This happens also in the Latin tradition. In the Hagia Sophia, the bishop would then proceed, sometimes with the emperor, and with all the clergy through the entire church, all the way up into the sanctuary, and the bishop would ascend his chair, called the high place, in the apse, beyond the altar table. This was indeed a very high place in churches in Byzantium, in cathedrals of Byzantium. So the origins of the Little Entrance go back to this hierarchical entrance from the cathedral rite, and it is this entrance that influences the development of the beginning rites of all our divine liturgies, even when they're not celebrated by a bishop. Why? Well, because that's the way liturgy developed under the influence of the great political centers, the capital cities like Constantinople, that were the trendsetters in cultural matters, including liturgy. There were also other influential liturgical centers like Jerusalem, Antioch, and earlier on Rome. But the concrete evidence I have found of this kind of entrance, with the kissing of a gospel and or other holy objects, is from Constantinopolitan sources. Now, what this evidence tells us is the following. First of all, the point of the Little Entrance, originally, was to have the bishop kiss the gospel book. That's surprising, I know, because now we also have this moment. The bishop or celebrating priest, if there's a deacon with him, is given the gospel book to kiss by the deacon who's carrying the gospel. But this kiss really to us looks just like an unimportant ceremonial embellishment, doesn't it? You wouldn't think, you wouldn't make this guess that that's the whole point of this procession. Secondly, we see very clearly what the ultimate destination of the Little Entrance procession is. It's the high place. It's not actually the altar table, because it looks like it is. You know, everybody stops, the priest or bishop stops in front of the altar table. That's what it looks like anyway. So, the destination of the Little Entrance procession is actually the high place, the seat of the main celebrant behind the altar table. So, please listen carefully. Even though today it looks as if the little entrance is a procession that departs from and returns to the same exact place in the sanctuary, it is actually not that way. It is actually an approach to that chair. Now, we still haven't answered the following question, posed at the beginning of this lecture. Why do we, in the Russian-influenced churches, why do we not take that long route through the whole church for the little entrance, or the great entrance either, for that matter? Because in medieval Muscovy, we don't know exactly from which century, there was a local architectural detail that developed in the very middle of the nave, in the middle of the church. The Muscovites erected a huge platform called an Ambo. Now, the Greeks also had an Ambo at a certain period, and there was one in Hagia Sophia. But in Muscovy, these platforms were so big. See, the platform, upon this platform, the singers would chant. And in Muscovy, they were so big that witnesses said that you couldn't see the iconostasis at all from most vantage points within the church. Okay? So we could see that, that witnesses before the famous Niconian reforms that happened, you might not know about these, but just trust me, there were reforms in the Russian church that were initiated by Patriarch Nikon of Moscow. Anyway, these ambos were only abolished throughout the course of this reform, okay? But these constructions in the middle of the church would obstruct the little entrance procession or the great entrance processions. So in order to solve this problem, the Russians would just proceed avoiding that altogether with a short procession. Okay, so that's just a fun fact. Now, I hope that for your historical information, that has been satisfying. Next, we would like to talk about the prayer of the little entrance. So please stay tuned for that. I think that'll be interesting, and we'll get a little bit more to the theology behind this little entrance.